Greetings, we're Technically a Conversation, a podcast for curious people by curious people.
Every week, we take turns presenting a new topic, and the other host has no idea what the topic will be.
We strive to educate in a way that's loose and fun. Our topics are all over the place, from light and funny to dark and sometimes spooky.
Some of the topics we've covered include urban legends, civil rights activists, vampires, pop culture icons, the supernatural and occult, spies and espionage, science and astronomy, and other weird and random things.
If any of these topics interest you, give our podcast a shot. Listen and subscribe at technicallyaconversation.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Parental advisory, we might use strong language.
Yeah, I noticed, but fire's no problem for me. As I was saying, Green Lantern can do anything.
Except shut up, apparently.
Wow, someone forgot to take their true blood tonight.
I'm not a vampire.
Seriously? I thought with the darkness and the vanishing, then the what, super strength?
No.
Can you fly?
In a plane.
Wait, you're not just some guy in a bat costume, are you? Are you freaking kidding me? What? Nobody asked you to prom, so now you dress as a bat and prowl around your parents' basement?
What's this do?
Huh?
No buttons. I assume it works off concentration.
How'd you do that?
You weren't concentrating.
You won't do that again.
Unless I want to.
That's it! Let's rumba, Spooky!
Pull fast. We need more info.
Oh crap, that's a bomb and he just armed it! Lantern, wait!
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming another guest, a fellow author, and that is Henry Young Shel. Henry, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm super excited to be on a superhero podcast discussing superheroes. It's a real treat for me. It's a real treat.
Yeah, well, when I saw you on the Podmatch website, I saw you were a superhero author. I'm like, well, I got to try and have this guy on, being a superhero author myself. So,
Yeah.
So why don't we start there? Tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, as you said, I'm an author of superhero fiction. I came to superhero writing books by way of hip hop music, believe it or not. So originally I was a recording artist for my, probably 10, 15 years. But I also had a passion for comics all the way through. And I'm not sure if your listeners know or you're quite aware of how much big name hip hop artists are influenced by comic books, from Run DMC to Method Man, who is the host of Marvel Method podcast as we speak today. So yeah, hip hop and comics have a symbiotic relationship for quite some time. And probably about, I want to say, a dozen years ago, I took a leap of faith and I got into that world. I published my first superhero books for kids called Power Blast Kids, and the rest is history. I never looked back.
I knew that there are some hip hop artists, like obviously, I think like the Wu-Tang Clan also have.
Yes,
some,
yeah.
And some other ones obviously too that I've heard of, but I wasn't aware that it was that widespread. I thought those were
Right.
like outliers. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you got into comic books in the first place then.
Well, comic books specifically, I'll be honest with you, I never really got into reading or collecting comic books especially the serialized, week to week. You have your pull list type of thing. I never got into that. I came to superheroes and the culture very late in my life. So I would say I was in my mid to late 20s before I even started really getting passionate about it. So I tend to lean towards the actual movies and the TV shows, and the first TV show that really got me into it was the 90s X-Men show. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Oh yeah, that was my gateway drug as well. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that one. Oh man, that just totally took me by the heartstrings, and I was hooked. Like from there, I just got super passionate about comics or superheroes in general. And I love the thing about that particular show that hooked me was the fact that it was cartoon and it was superheroes, but the subject matter that they were dealing with was real. Like immediately the first thing that jumped out at me was the relationship between the love relationships that seemed to be prevalent front and center, and it wasn't like a weird thing, or it wasn't like a side note thing. It was like front and center, the relationship between Gambit and Rogue, and then the love triangle between Wolverine and Jean Grey and Cyclops. And I was blown away that you could talk about mature things like that in comics or superheroes. And yeah, from there it was just
we actually just about a week ago recorded an episode all about that subject, the idea of superhero romance. So
right.
By the time when we're recording this now, it hasn't been released yet, but it'll be out in a few weeks. So keep an eye out for that. We had a romance author to come on and talk about.
Oh, for real?
And we did spend a bit of time talking about the Gambit and Rogue stuff and the soap opera aspect of superheroes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm super excited to hear that, and I'm definitely can't wait to listen to it. That's my jam as a writer. That's what I've leaned into from day one. My whole brand or my whole thing is about Hearts and Powers is my current project that I'm dealing with. But for my entire career as a writer, all the stuff I've written is all romantic superhero or romantic modern fantasy. I'm a romantic at heart from the time I was born. So even as a recording artist, I used to be the one rapper amongst my peers who was always writing hip hop love songs from day one. It was my DNA. It was like I was the one man in the crew that was all about speaking to the ladies and speaking to the fears of the heart. So I just followed that right through into my writing for superhero fiction. And my current project I'm dealing with is called Hearts and Powers. It's gonna be available late next month. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it right now.
So we're recording this in May, but this episode will be dropping about a month later. So this will be coming out at the end of June. So I think it'll probably, when exactly is it coming out? Do you have an exact date?
I don't have an exact date right now. As an independent creator, I don't, there's no machine behind me, so everything's approximate. Things change on a dime, but I've been working on this. It's been a labor of love for years, and I'm really excited that I'm right at the finish line right now. It's definitely going to be available next month, June 2022. I'm just not sure exactly the specific date, but I'm just putting the finishing touches on it now. But as you mentioned, that if listeners of this podcast want to get the exact date and get the information, they can listen to my podcast, Capes and Mics, which is available on every streaming platform, including where they're listening to this song, whether it be Spotify or Apple Music. And it basically, my podcast chronicles my journey of being an independent creator, producing hip hop music and putting that out, as well as my superhero fiction. And on the podcast from week to week, you get updates, and they'll be able to hear exactly when and where they can get the Hearts and Powers project, which is the current project that's about to be released.
Very cool. Now you mentioned there that you got into writing superhero fiction through hip hop. So how did that transition happen? Was it just because of the fact that so many hip hop artists you listened to were superhero fans, or was there another reason that you made that caused you to make that jump?
That jump, yeah. That's a very good question, and I like it. Because on the surface, it does seem like a jump, to be honest. Like using that terminology makes sense. And I'll actually, to tell you the truth, it actually was a more indirect route. So I wasn't even thinking about hip hop, or my involvement in recording music had nothing to do with me starting to write. It actually came from me becoming a father. I got married at around age 26, and I had a ready-made family. So my wife at the time had two kids, two boys. who were, of grade school age. At the same time, I had also made the foolish decision that, well, if I'm getting married and I'm having a family, I'm too old to be chasing this hip hop dream. So let's put that stuff aside. No more music, no more, acting like a young thug, so to speak. So, but what I didn't realize in that whole process, those two decisions, that abandoning music left a huge void as a creative soul. I'm a creative person. I didn't really realize that until I got married and went through that process. I thought it was just I had a passion for music, but when I got rid of it, it's like I nearly died inside. I had no outlet creatively.
Right.
So after about a year, I realized I need to do something else. So I said, let me try writing, because all my life, teachers, parents, family, friends always said, yo, you're a good writer. So I was like, oh, maybe let me try my hand at writing. And if I'm gonna try, it's a nice mature thing that I could do as a grown up, a nice grown up thing to do with kids. But if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do something that I like. So I was like, well, what am I passionate about? What gets me excited? Well, superheroes get me excited. Action, what I mean? I'm a man. So fast forward probably about 5 years into that journey, because I didn't just pick up a pen when I made the decision and started putting out books. I had to just learn, as any other craft. But about 5 years into it, when my stepsons at that time were a little bit older, around the reading age, 8 to 12 years old, they were not very interested in reading at all. And of course, that's a very important thing that they need to be able to do. So that's the thing that actually pushed me into publishing and really getting books, stories out there. I was like, well, I want to get my young boys interested in reading, get them excited about reading. And if I'm writing, maybe I can write some stuff that will get them interested. And that's pretty much how it started. That was the genesis of me becoming an actual published author. I came up with, as I said, my very first series, The Power Blast Kids, which was centered around kids superheroes in a world where only kids were superheroes. No adults, no grown people had superhuman abilities, only kids. And it was a real fun comedic type of take on the superhero genre centered around kids, and the kids loved it. And that was it.
Awesome. So how long have you been publishing now?
That was 2007, 2008. So we're looking at roughly just over a dozen years. Actually, no, more than that.
Yeah.
Closer to 15 years now.
I also started around 2007 myself. So we've been in the game for the same amount of time.
Cool. If I can ask, did you publish through like online platform or like direct, like a direct, like are you familiar with Lulu or?
Yeah. When I started out, that was pre-Kindle, because the Kindle came out in 2010. So back then it was either vanity presses, which they charged like $1,000 to publish.
Yeah.
Or it was Lulu, which at that point it was like $30 to publish. So I went through. I published my first books through Lulu. My first one was through Lulu, and then after that, Create Space came out after that, and then after that I started going through Create Space, and then after that I had discovered about the Kindle and all that. So then I started publishing through Kindle, and so now I've got about 30 novels out. But
my head just exploded. Holy. Okay. Yeah. I mean, just even from the moment you said Create Space and you started talking, I'm like, okay, I definitely need to pick your brain, because you're light years ahead of me, even though, time wise, we're in the same zone, but you're compared to me, you're prolific. Like you're a giant in this game. 30. Wow.
Yeah. Well, everyone's journey is different. Like there have been people who started after me and who have been far more successful and have published even far more than I have. So there's some monster prolific writers out there that even
wow.
But we can talk more about that later. But now, so you said you had the Kids Hero series, and now you've got the more romantic series. Are these connected? Are they all in like the same world, or are they
separate? Okay. So the short answer to that is yes, but they're not directly related. So it's not like Power Blast Kids directly interact with my main characters in this grown-up world of Hearts and Powers. The Hearts and Powers is really 100% grown-up superhero soap opera, targeted and written from the perspective of grown-ups. It's actually two female lead characters in their late 20s and early 30s. So it's a completely different thing. but they are related in the sense that they exist in the same universe. They exist in the same city that my main character is existing, which is called Saga City for Hearts and Powers. The Power Blast Kids series is a series that's created by other characters that are in that city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. All right, so now let's start talking about this movie. Now we're talking about Justice League War, which came out in 2014. This was part of this. It was an interesting time because this was, well, I think technically the start of it was the Flashpoint Paradox movie, where they had kind of set up this new kind of like DC animated universe. And then after that, they had Batman, Son of Batman, which was the adaptation of Grant Morrison's first arc on the Batman comic books that brought in Damian Wayne. And then they had released around the same time, I'm not sure exactly how the timeline works, what the order is, but then they also had Justice League War. And there have been a bunch of other movies in this series. There's been, after this came Throne of Atlantis. There were a bunch of the Batman movies like Bad Blood, Justice League versus Teen Titans, and The Death of Superman and Reign of the Supermen. And now they pretty much closed the book on it with the recent Justice League Dark movie, Apocalypse War. So that really kind of like concluded this universe and closed it all up. But they had a lot, it was like the same art style all throughout. Pretty much all the same voice actors, I believe. And it was very heavily influenced by the New 52. And this one especially very much influenced by Geoff Johns and Jim Lee's first story arc on Justice League.
Okay.
So that's kind of the background of this. So when was the first time you ended up watching this movie? I think I saw it probably about I didn't see it when it first came out. It was like a few years after. It had to have been
really
like I think so. I think it was like 2015, 2016. I stumbled upon it somewhere, and that was the first time I had watched it. Yeah. How about you?
I definitely saw it when it actually came out, like the year that it came out. I would have seen it like within probably no more than a month of it coming out, give or take. Because I mean, I said it to you offline in our communications. For me, when it comes to superhero content, I feel like the DC animated movies are the creme de la creme. They're like the cream of the crop, even better than the live action stuff. So I'm always just on it. So when it came out, I was on it. And like for me, it's probably to this day still my favorite one out of all of them. And I love all the DC animated stuff. As you mentioned, this was around that time when this came out. It was the beginning of this whole, I guess, bigger universe that they're creating, series of movies. But even going back, even I would say probably even almost 10 years before that, when they did Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, the first animated version of that, when that came out, I was ridiculously excited, and I shared it with my kids at the time. And for me, that was just like a gateway, and I just couldn't get enough of the DC animated stuff. So like you said, when this came out, Justice League War, I was right on it.
Were you familiar at all with the comic that it was based on?
The Justice League War, no.
Okay. This was a reboot that part of the New 52, where they had kind of rebooted the entire DC universe. And this was like a reboot of the Justice League that Geoff Johns was the writer on, Jim Lee was the artist, and they'd kind of established these new looks for the characters. So, you know, Superman's got a new costume, Wonder Woman's got a new costume.
Wonder Woman has that new costume,
Right. Batman's got some slight tweaks to his classic costume. Green Lantern, Flash, Cyborg, Shazam, all of them have like a little bit of tweaks here and there. The major difference between these two is that Shazam was not part of the original storyline. It was Aquaman instead. Geoff Johns did do a Shazam backup feature in those comics though, and then so they kind of like they took Aquaman out and they put Shazam in, which I think was kind of, I think they had done that just because this was still at a time when Aquaman was still kind of considered kind of a joke character by most mainstream audiences. So I feel like that's the reason why they did that. Which, you know, for me, it's disappointing because I think Aquaman's total badass, but
he is now for sure.
Definitely now. But even before that, like back in the as far back as the early 90s. Like you had
Really?
Peter David was doing an excellent run on Aquaman that made him a huge badass. Grant
Really?
Morrison's Justice League also too made him a real badass in that.
So you have to go back and check those stuff for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Peter David's Aquaman, Grant Morrison's JLA, amazing comics. But also they had one thing that Geoff Johns did was he had replaced Martian Manhunter, who was part of the original Justice League lineup, and they brought in Cyborg instead, who was originally more of a Teen Titans character.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that was the big change. And I read the comic book at the time it came out. So and it's not a bad comic. It's totally okay. It's you know, it's well written. It's, you know, story, the art's beautiful as anything Jim Lee does. But it's I'm a stickler for the Martian Manhunter though. So the fact that they took him out is one of my biggest sticking points about this.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm just glad. I'm glad. I'm happy. I'm enjoying this conversation already, just for the fact that you're enlightening me to so much things I didn't know. Like I had no idea this one was from a comic book to begin with. Like how Public Enemies, I knew that was a comic book
right
when that came out, and that's why I was excited about it, because it actually was my first graphic novel that I bought when I decided to go in to get passionate about comics. And I shared it with my son, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know that graphic novel I showed you that we read? Guess what? They're doing a movie on. And so that's why I was excited about that. But this one now, flash forward, you know, how many years later, I had no idea it was a comic book.
Yeah.
So you know, like how they usually say the book is better than the movie when it comes to books. How do you rate it compared to the comic book? This overall adaptation.
I rate the comic book slightly better, and the main reason is I feel like Shazam is really kind of tacked on in this. I don't feel like he really adds a lot, whereas Aquaman felt like a much more organic part of the team in the original one. And especially one of my favorite scenes in that series, in the comic, was Green Lantern is going off on Aquaman. He's kind of saying like, you know, oh, well, you know, we can do all this stuff. You know, we got Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern. He's like, what can you do? You're Aquaman. What can you do? You talk to fish? And then Aquaman just turns away and he just gestures, and sharks leap out of the water and, you know, grab parademons out of midair. Yeah. And that just kind of like completely shut Green Lantern up.
Yeah.
Wow. So like just for that scene alone, the comic book takes priority for me.
Wow, that's really crazy, but interesting for me to hear, because I'm like, as you said, up until these animated movies that came out, this series, I was one of those people too, that I just figured that like Aquaman is just such a useless character, like not to mention, you know, wimpy, not really, like, you know, as you said, badass. So that's an interesting take. I didn't realize that they did that in the comics before they did these movies. Like, although he's not in Justice League War, as you said, the follow-up solo movie that they did for him that came out very shortly after, that was my first. Yeah, that was my first introduction into Aquaman the badass. And you're right, he was ridiculously, like, he was a fucking badass in that movie, and that movie turned me into a fan. I was like, okay, so you can do good Aquaman, and he is useful. Yeah,
a lot of that is down to I think it was the Super Friends cartoon, because there was really kind of, and then after that you had and then especially in like the 90s, like every single stand-up comedian had like a 5-minute set on why Aquaman was so lame.
Sucks. Yeah.
So it became like this real cultural in fact, you know, if you ever look up McSweeney's Aquaman, there's the great article they did. It was like called Aquaman King of the Seven Seas has had it with your shit. It's a brilliant piece. Definitely look that up.
I gotta look that up.
Yeah.
McSweeney's Aquaman.
Yeah, it was brilliant. So for that, and DC at the time, the animation division, all of the movies, pretty much all the movies they were putting out at the time were all kind of adaptations of comic book stories.
Comics. Okay.
Yeah. So because you had at this point the DCAU stuff that started with Batman the Animated Series and it ended with Justice League Unlimited. That was all over by this point. So now they were just kind of putting out these direct-to-video animated features. And at first it was just like adaptations of well-known storylines. So you had like you said, the Superman Batman ones, which were based on the Jeff Loeb, the first run he did with Ed McGuinness, and then after that the one he did with Michael Turner, and then classic stories too, like The Dark Knight Returns, or and what they had done in a lot of these is they had tried to match the animation and like try to use the animation style to kind of match
from the actual comics style that they had in the comic. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, like how they did Justice League New Frontier when they did that.
Exactly. That was another
they
one.
matched it exactly with the comic version,
with Darwin Cook's style.
Yeah.
And it worked really well in some instances. Like it worked really well with the Superman Batman ones. Like they did a really good job of matching McGuinness's style and matching Michael Turner's style.
Yeah.
Dark Knight Returns, New Frontier, I think those were like the ones that did it the best. Like there was perfect match to the original art. It doesn't quite work so well with Justice League War, and I think part of the problem is that Jim Lee has such heavy use of rendering in his artwork, like lots of line work, lots of detail work. You can't really do that in animation because the animators will kill themselves.
yeah. That's
So that was one of my sticking points of this, is that even though I understand they can't make it look exactly like Jim Lee's style, I did think some of the design choices were a little bit weak. Like I think Superman looks too, his face looks too big, his neck looks too big. I thought that was I thought he was looking a little bit too bulky for that, and I don't really like that New 52 redesign for Superman. What were some of your thoughts on the style, the animation, and the character designs?
Well, again, for me, because I had no idea this was a comic book, I came into it 100% like thinking this was just all original content and there was no reference material, right? So from that perspective, like the artwork for me, I just found it all great. Like I loved the animation style. I loved the artwork. I loved all the costumes. Like there was nothing about the visuals that left me wanting something more, or left me disappointed or upset. Like to me, it was really good. I tend to like, when it comes to artwork, I tend to like stuff that looks more modern, like when the New Frontier and the stylistic stuff, the super highly stylistic types of artwork, that tends to lose me. But when that stays in that real modern vein, like how it is in Justice League War, or even like you said, the other ones, the Ed McGuinness style ones,
right.
Yeah, those ones get me right in my heartstrings, right? The one thing I didn't like was in terms of costume. I'm not 100% sure I love that version of Wonder Woman's costume, the pant version. It's not bad. Like I don't necessarily 100% dislike it, but I'm not really in love with it either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
also had a problem with I thought that the lack of a black outline around the S shield on Superman's costume, I felt like it made it look muddled. It made it look a little blurry. Whereas opposed, if you had a black outline, I think it would have popped a little bit more. So that's something.
You sure you're not also an illustrator? Because
I am actually.
There you go. That attention to detail. Because I'm like, yo, the average Joe is not even like.
No,
I didn't
absolutely.
Even pick that. You know what I mean? Yeah. But that's serious. Yeah, and those little details make a difference. Like
they do. Yeah.
Both consciously in some cases, but also subconsciously or unconsciously to the viewer. You know, they don't even know or realize that they're just something different. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, and most of the looks I think I'm fine with. I love Batman. I love I think Green Lantern looks pretty cool. The Flash too, although I think kind of a little bit too much line work on the Flash, but otherwise, and Shazam too, I think all of their costumes, Cyborg as well, all of them work really well. I think all of them are nice updates. It was mostly Superman and Wonder Woman for me, and it's not because I'm married to classic looks of those characters. I think what they're doing, I thought, even though I've got lots of problems with the Snyder movies, I thought the Superman costume looked great in those. Same thing with Wonder Woman. I think what they've done to the Superman costume on Superman and Lois, the TV show, I think that looks really good too. So I'm not opposed to that, but I think like there are just little tiny details. Like I think the neckline's too high on it, and just like the overall shape of the character is a little too bulky for me for a lot of that. So those are just
for Superman specifically.
For Superman specifically, yeah.
Okay.
For Wonder Woman, it's more I don't really like the black look in there. I prefer the blue and the gold.
Right.
But what were some of the things that you really liked about this movie? Because you said this was your favorite of the DC movies so far.
Oh my gosh. The reason, right out the gate, the reason why it's one of my favorite is two things. One, I love how this movie is basically the origin of them coming together. Like they don't know each other right off the bat from the very beginning of the movie. They're like all meeting each other for the first time, with the exception, I think, of Green Lantern and Flash seems to have had already known each other or encountered each other. But like Green Lantern is coming up to Batman and acting like he's he's the big man on campus, and like he's gonna tell Batman what to do, or Batman take a back seat to him. And I'm like, it's just so, like, I've never seen that dynamic between any of the Justice League in any interpretation or any medium that I've read, watched, or whatever in all my life until this. And it was just very interesting and really fresh for me to see that. Another part that I liked was when Flash shows up for the first time and sees Batman, and he's totally fanboying over Batman, and Green Lantern is like so mad. Like all those type of dynamics were things that were all brand new to me, and I just loved that.
One of the things I loved about that scene too is Green Lantern, obviously him and Flash have worked together. He knows his true identity. He calls him Barry. But he seems to be, he seems to have this attitude of, he's like, oh, it's Flash, he's my buddy, he's gonna have my back, and then he's fanboying all over Batman, and then and Green Lantern's like kind of expecting, Batman to treat him like shit, and then Batman turns around, he's like, I've seen, I like your work, you do good work over in Central City.
Yeah. So much. I think when you bring that into it, that example, it makes me think that, to be honest, it's just the whole overall relationship dynamics between them all that makes me like this movie so much, because it's just so much unexpected dynamics between them all, because they don't know each other and they're just meeting each other in a lot of cases. So there's all these different nuances and ways that they react and things they say that I would have never heard in any other version of the Justice League, that are sometimes funny, sometimes just totally interesting, like the dynamic again of Green Lantern really thinking he's the shit and having to be slowly brought down a peg to realize, okay, wait, like Batman is the man that is the man, like, you know what I mean? You got to bow down. Seeing both of them, Flash and Green Lantern, and even Twist and Superman, all fawning over Wonder Woman and all falling all over themselves over Wonder Woman. Even that alone is just like, it makes sense. Why hasn't it have been done before? Like she's the only one in the whole group. She's the only woman, and she's a badass, and she's hot as hell. So it's only natural that it's one of them, if not all of them, are gonna at some point crush on her. You know what I mean? So even seeing that was cool. Seeing that dynamic. Seeing Superman be a badass for the first time I've ever seen him be a badass in any of the incarnations of Justice League. That to me, I love. That was refreshing, because that's one of the reasons why he's not my favorite character in Batman, is because he's just such a Boy Scout. So it's really nice to see him be like, yo, like really, like I'm damn near a god. Like I can, like, why are you guys even talking to me? Like, yeah.
See, for me, me being a Superman fan, I prefer, I'm much more of the Boy Scout side.
Boy Scout.
Okay. I like the idea of Superman being this guy who, he's just a nice guy who does the right thing just because he can do the right thing. I have always liked that about him. That's always been one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite things about him. So the New 52 and also like the Man of Steel and all that. So those types of approaches, they're very cold to me, because they take away from what I think makes
that heart, so the heart of him. Yeah, you're not
exactly.
You're not the first person to say that. Like when was it Zack Snyder's
Yeah.
Superman? No, so yeah, when that version of him came out, I think a lot of people were saying that like it's missing that heart that Superman is about. Like you said, the Boy Scout, the guy that will like swoop in and save the day, but also be like totally the gentle giant, almost, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? Yeah.
If you haven't seen Superman and Lois on the CW, or also the first seasons on HBO Max, they have what I think is the perfect modern interpretation of Superman. Where he's still got that, that kind of like Midwestern charm, this Boy Scout aspect to him. But also he's just like, kind of a dorky dad. It's like this kind of aspect. It's a really cool interpretation of him. Yeah.
I have to see that.
You definitely got to check it out. It's really good.
It's a CW one though.
It's a CW show, but the first season's on HBO Max.
So in that version, is his parents alive? Is John and Martha Kent still alive? Or
no. Jonathan has been dead in that one for a while, and Martha actually dies in the premiere, and that kind of brings them back to Smallville. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But instead of but him and Lois are parents in that. So they've got two teenage boys. And so it's a really cool dynamic to see them as parents. And it's got one of the best, it's talking about, superhero romance stuff. It's got one of the best, most mature takes on a superhero romance that I've seen in any medium, comics, movies.
What?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely. You got to check it out.
Yo, that's high praise, yo. Like, okay, I definitely have to check that out. Yeah. That's crazy.
It's really good. So going back to Green Lantern, one of the things I thought was interesting about it is like, so there have been multiple Green Lanterns in the comics. So you have Hal Jordan is like the most famous, but you've also had John Stewart, obviously, who was in the Justice League cartoons, Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner. Alan Scott was the first one way back in the Golden Age. But one of the interesting things is that it feels like, I've never been a Hal Jordan fan, and I'm not that familiar with him, but it almost feels like they kind of gave Guy Gardner's personality to Hal Jordan in this, because Guy Gardner was much more of like the asshole Green Lantern, like the guy who was like very confrontational. In fact, one of the most memorable scenes in like classic Justice League comics is he's arguing with Batman, and he's like challenging Batman to a fight for leadership over the Justice League. And he takes off his ring and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to kick your ass." And then Batman decks him with one punch.
Wow. I didn't realize that that dynamic of having Green Lantern really kind of challenge Batman is something that has been explored before in the comics, even though it's not this version, it's not Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that's something that's like that's been explored.
There was also some additional animosity because Hal Jordan with Hal Jordan and Batman specifically in the comics in the 90s, Hal Jordan went dark side, went evil, and he became a supervillain. And then after that, he eventually sacrificed his life and then eventually ended up being resurrected and redeemed. And there was still that kind of animosity between him and Batman, because Batman's like, he's like, doesn't matter, I don't think you've changed. You're still, I think you're still a villain type of thing. So there was some animosity there that I think Geoff Johns was definitely leaning on when he was writing this story.
I have a vague recollection. I don't think it was the 90s. I think it was like in the 2000s of this comic book arc where Green Lantern was bad, and he became, like, as you said,
Parallax. That was the
Parallax. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. That was in the 90s.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, and he definitely. I never read it. I just have, like throughout my whole, as I said, I never really was into the comics, but throughout the 90s and the early 2000s, I was.
Stuff kind of seeps in through osmosis.
Exactly, through the pop culture. I even just being on the bus and hearing other people come on the bus and talking about. Anytime I heard anything talk about comics or superheroes, my ears keying in and I'm listening. I found out about the whole Onslaught series and the whole Onslaught thing in Marvel just by hearing some other random people talk about it on the bus, and from that I just kind of and I just became a fan of that, and I ended up getting that later on in the when I started collecting. So not to go too far off on a tangent, but when I started collecting in the like around closer to around 2010. For me, part of the reason why I never did real comics is because I didn't have the patience to go week to week and follow a story ongoing. So to me, what I said, let me jump in with trade paperbacks and or graphic novels. That's what I like to do. So when I decided I'm gonna try and put my money where my mouth is and actually start collecting, that's what I was doing. I was doing strictly trade paperbacks, and the Onslaught thing was one of the first things that I got, as well as Marvel versus DC.
I'm all trades myself these days. It's just it's such a I find me personally, I find it's a better experience just to have the whole story in one volume.
Right.
Whereas
yeah.
I had when I'd gone digital a few years ago, I'd gotten back into month to month comics for a little bit, but
yeah,
I found myself, just because I was reading so many different things, and I found myself forgetting what had happened in the previous issue.
Yeah.
And so eventually I just decided to just switch completely to trades, and it's for me at least, it's a much more enjoyable reading experience.
Right. Yeah. I would personally, from me too, I agree. That's why that's where I jumped in, and that's what the only type of comics book that I get. Like even when I go to like Comic Cons or /Fan Expo here in Toronto, that's all I buy is strictly graphic novels and trades. Yeah. And even the independent stuff. But yeah, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but
no, that happens all the time on here. But no, I thought, even though like Hal Jordan's not my favorite Green Lantern, and even though I think it was an interesting choice to give him more of the Guy Gardner personality. I really kind of liked him in this movie. I liked that he was kind of like the more confrontational type. Right. And especially when you contrast it with the Flash, who I thought the Flash did a great job. And and this take on Batman too, it's also it's a really cool take. I think Jason O'Mara does a really good job, where he's not like that's the voice actor.
Voice actor. Yeah.
He's not he's not the grim dark Batman, but he's more like the classic 70s Batman, where he's got some sense of humor. He's got a bit of this sardonic.
I'm glad I like that you made that observation, because that's something that I realized, but I didn't realize it consciously. Like until you pointed it out right now. But I'm like, the entire time I was watching it, because I went back to rewatch it once you booked me for this show. So we watched it like a couple of weeks ago, and as I was watching it, I'm like, I'm loving this Batman. There's something different about him, but I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'm loving it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's still Batman. He's still dark. He's still the badass, but he has a little bit more of a humanity to him, like you're saying, and a little bit of more. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. It's almost like,
sorry, go ahead.
It's almost like they did like a 50% Freaky Friday with Superman and Batman, where they gave Superman a little bit of Batman, 50, and then they gave Batman a little bit of Superman. You know what I mean?
I think that's a really good point. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is probably trying to balance the characters out a little bit more. And Geoff, and I think also too, it was just like the pressures of, like you said, the belief that Superman's just a Boy Scout, so we have to dirty him up a little bit to make him a little bit more edgy and a little bit more modern. I think that was probably like the guiding principle they were relying on for those.
Yeah. Again, now that sorry.
I was just gonna say, what did you think of the voice cast?
Voices, I pretty much liked them all. Can't think of any off the top of the head that I didn't like, because there's sometimes when there are definitely some times when I watch these animated movies where I'm like, that voice is not doing it for me. Like that voice for that character is just not right. I can't think of any that jumped out to me on this particular DC animated movie, but I will say that I was pleasantly surprised and shocked to find out when I read the credits after that Michelle Monaghan was Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
I was shocked, because I was like, listening to the whole movie or watching, I'm like, that voice came out of Michelle Monaghan? Like, no freaking way. Like, are you serious? Like, she had the typical solid Wonder Woman presence, commanding, presence, and the way she talked. Oh, speaking of that, I do like, speaking of things that were different that I liked, again, with Wonder Woman, how they they gave her that really innocent, like childlike view of the world, where she's even getting excited over ice cream when a little girl shows her what ice cream is for the first time. Like that whole dynamic they gave to Wonder Woman, I found that to be charming and really great. Again, balancing out her kick-ass, take names and shoot first, ask questions later attitude. You know, that warrior princess, to balance it out with bringing her down to earth as a kind of child of wonder. I like that. Definitely like that. It was new and refreshing.
Michelle Monaghan was actually one of the weakest casts for me, and I think it's
really,
and I think it's not necessarily anything that she does wrong. I think it's just being spoiled by other performances. So
right,
I totally get, like, I do like that scene. I do like that they brought this innocence to her.
Yes.
The thing is, though, in my head, and again, this is spoiled from watching Gal Gadot, like seeing Gal Gadot do that innocence thing so much better in the first Wonder Woman movie.
Right.
It really kind of, I just kept thinking, like, man, Gal Gadot did such a better job doing this.
You think so?
I
really?
think so. Yeah, I thought the early scenes when she was in the Wonder Woman movie, when she arrives in London and her kind of like innocence, and I thought I thought Gal Gadot did an amazing job of selling that.
Okay, so speaking of voices as being the topic of discussion, that's one of the examples, even though that's live action, where I was the opposite.
Oh,
like,
okay.
The whole Gal Gadot giving her that accent, it totally, to me, it just took me out of Wonder Woman completely. I was like, who is this? Like, this is not I've never heard Wonder Woman. It's never been spoken of Wonder Woman being like, you know, having any kind of accent or being, she's from, you know, whatever, Themyscira, but she's always had a very American, commanding, assertive, you know, type of tone. And so when they did that with her in the live action Gal Gadot version of her, it totally threw me. I was like, no, I'm not feeling this version of the voice for sure. Yeah.
That's fair. And I have, you know, it's interesting because I get where you're coming from. I'd always also, you know, kind of associated her with more kind of American accent.
Yeah.
And also, to use the opposite example, I'd always associated Black Widow in the comic books with, you know, a Russian accent.
With that Russian accent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then when you see them in live action and it's the opposite of what you would expect, it actually did work for me very well. Like, I thought Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman having the accent really fit her because she was coming from Themyscira. It helped kind of enhance that almost exotic feel.
Right.
So I thought it really worked for me. And whereas Black Widow, it worked in the opposite way, because my way of thinking was, well, she's a spy. Of course she'd be able to blend in and have an American accent.
Right.
So even though it was the opposite of what my expectation was, it worked for me in both instances.
Okay. Wow.
And I mentioned Jason O'Mara. I thought he did a great job as Batman, and he's done him through like pretty much most of these movies. I also really liked Christopher Gorham, who did the Flash. I thought he did a really good job of nailing that character and that accent, and that the way he played it, I thought really worked.
Again, all of them, I definitely don't have no disagreements. They all worked for me. To be honest, I'll be honest with you. I haven't really followed, you know, the cast of these animated movies, so I'm not really familiar with the different voices. I think there's one or two that I'm familiar with, in terms of the actual actors. The guy that does Batman a lot. I can't remember his name.
You mean in this one, or in
not in this one? Not in
Kevin
this
Conroy,
one. But
you're probably talking.
Yes,
about?
That's it. Yeah. His name I know for sure as a voice actor for a lot of these animated movies. But most of the other ones, like, I'm not really, you know, following and knowing who's doing the voices so much. But I definitely.
There was one that I thought also Sean Astin did Shazam, and he was also, you know, from the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yes,
he did a really good job. Yeah,
I love Shazam. Shamar Moore is another one. I was shocked to find out that he was what's his name?
Cyborg.
Yeah.
Again, he was good too.
Not someone you would associate to be involved in any kind of comic book properties, and you know. So yeah.
Alan Tudyk did Superman. I thought that was an interesting choice. And I thought he did a good job, but I feel like his voice, I think it would work more for a more classic take on Superman. I don't think it quite worked as well for this kind of edgier take on
That's
Superman.
crazy. Sorry, I'm doing my research while I'm talking to you. So I'm looking at the pictures of all the different actors, and I'm like, I know Alan Tudyk, like from like his face, I know him. I just don't know his name. You know what I mean?
Oh, right, yeah. From Firefly
right?
is probably the
Yeah,
most biggest
yeah.
thing.
And I'm shocked that he's the one that did Superman. Like,
Yeah.
are you serious? I guess that's why they call it acting, and that's why they get paid the big bucks. And you and I are just writers.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Well, Green Lantern, Justin Kirk did the voice for him. I thought he did a good job, although my only complaint there is, did you see Justice League Doom?
Yes, I don't remember much of it off the top of my head, but I did see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that one, another Firefly alum, that was God, the main guy in Firefly. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name.
I never watched Firefly.
Oh, you never watched Firefly?
I know. Shocking. Yes, I haven't watched it. I mean,
Nathan Fillion.
I watched it, but I don't remember anything from it. I wasn't like a huge fan. Like I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't my thing. Yeah.
Okay. So he was the main guy on Firefly, Nathan Fillion, and he did the voice of Hal Jordan in Justice League Doom. Okay. And I thought I thought he did such an amazing job of doing Hal Jordan. And it's nothing against Justin Kirk. I think Justin Kirk did a really good job, but I think Justin Kirk would probably fit more with this more dickish version of Hal Jordan, but I did still find myself missing Nathan Fillion's
voice.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a little bit of that with Kevin Conroy too, and Jason O'Mara. Like there are some times when Jason O'Mara, it kind of feels like, okay, it feels like you're trying to do Kevin Conroy, but you're not Kevin Conroy.
Yeah. He has like I don't know for anybody else out there, including yourself, but for me, Kevin Conroy has the voice of Batman.
Yeah,
like he is the voice. Like, signature. Like just like how Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark in live action, like persona. Like, Kevin Conroy's Batman for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely agree with that.
Perfect.
All right. Anything else you wanted to mention about this movie? Anything else that kind of stood out to you?
I don't know. Like I said, like to me, just like again, all the way around. Like another reason why I liked it in terms of, so like you and I are fanboys. You and I are hardcore, like into superheroes, nerd stuff, whatever. But like for someone who is not necessarily the more casual observer, let's say, people like someone's wife or their girlfriend, or not to be sexist, or like their partner of whatever gender, or just someone who's a casual observer who's just a fan of, let's say, the Marvel movies, the Marvel MCU, but it's not really hardcore into. If you were to tell them one of the animated movies to start with for the DC, I feel like this one is the perfect one to start. Reason being because as a storyline and a plot, it's not too deep in drama. It's like really a very simple, basic plot that's really centered around a lot of action right from the very beginning, from the opening scene. It starts with Green Lantern encountering the parademon, and Batman, and it's just from one action scene to the next, pretty much. There's a little bit of drama in between, but as far as overall screen time of action to drama, it's just like a lot of action compared to a lot of the other movies. So I feel like because of that level, that huge amount of action, the simplicity of the plot, but mixed with so much unique, fun dynamics between the different characters, I feel like it's the perfect DC animated movie to bring a casual observer into the universe if they wanted to watch.
So that's a good question. What did your kids think of this movie? How do they rate this compared to some of the other ones?
Okay, so two things. Number one, my kids are grown now. Like when this came out, they would have been they're much older now. I also don't live with them anymore, so they live with their mom. We're no longer together or whatever. But so I don't even know if they've seen this one. I haven't sat down and watched this one with them. But I can know just by knowing them and knowing how much they enjoyed the other ones that we've watched together, Public Enemies being the very first one, I'm 1,000% sure that they would love this one, because again, the same things I just mentioned, that like the action is ramped up, like to me, compared to Public Enemies, compared to Apocalypse, compared to New Frontier, compared to all of them, even especially the Batman ones which are a lot more dramatic. This one is just like, it's just action beat after action beat, and each action beat gets magnified and multiplied and just gets even bigger and bigger. The villain, we haven't even talked about Darkseid.
Oh yeah, Darkseid.
What'd you think of him in this version?
I think I'm spoiled because I thought the Superman the animated series and the Justice League cartoons, I think they did like the perfect version of Darkseid. And I thought that it's just like I mean, this one he's fine, but I just don't feel that he has that same kind of presence that he had in those other adaptations.
I can see where you're saying in terms of being that big bad of the movie. That really, I understand what you're saying. I can see that. Like, overall, if I'm being honest, really brutally honest, it did seem that them defeating him and getting him back to to his realm seemed a little bit too easy for the level of a villain that he is touted as being in the DC universe. But that's also, again, because I know I'm so familiar with the source material that, you know what I mean? But I would say that for me, it was eye-opening in watching it compared to, let's say, what's his name? Marvel Universe.
Oh, Thanos?
Thanos, yes. Even in rewatching this Justice League War, which I watched when it came out originally, but I completely forgot about it. When I rewatched it last week, I'm like, man, Darkseid is a fucking badass. Like, he makes Thanos look like a freaking Boy Scout. Like, he was. I don't know what your take is on it.
I actually had the opposite take on that.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because like, and I think part of the problem is the lack of buildup. Because I think if you because Thanos, we had such a slow build to him, so that when he appears fully in Infinity War, and just right from the start, because like I think that opening scene in Infinity War is just it's like a perfect way to, because we've been building up to this guy and now we get to see him in action. And first thing he does is he beats the ever-loving shit out of the Hulk without the stones or anything. And especially after you've had all these movies of the Hulk being like the big bad that everyone should be afraid of. Where even Thor has trouble facing off against him. And then all of a sudden you've got Thanos who beats him down in like 5 minutes flat. Right. And then it escalates from there. That's where he starts, and it escalates from there. And I feel like Darkseid, both in this movie and also in the live action movies, I think it's done a disservice where we don't really get that same kind of buildup.
Hold on, sorry. Sorry, did you just say the live action version of Darkseid?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Wait, he's in the Snyder cut?
He's in the Snyder cut, yeah.
Shut
Not much, but he's in there, yeah.
I haven't watched the Snyder cut, so that's why I'm like, what the flip?
Well, you like the Man of Steel, so maybe you'll like it. I mean, for me, it was 4 hours of my life I'll never get back.
Never get back. Well, did you like the non-Snyder cut of Justice League? I'm
mixed on it. I liked it better than the Snyder cut, and and the reason, for one key reason, because Henry Cavill actually got to play Superman as closer to what I think of as Superman. Like, he had the charm, he had the kind of he was much more laid back. He wasn't as angsty, he smiled actually. Bad CGI lip aside, I thought he did I thought the character interaction, I much more enjoyed the character interactions in the Whedon cut of it. But I didn't really like either one that much.
Right.
but just for the treatment of Superman alone, the Whedon cut, and also it's not 4 hours. So just for those two reasons alone, the Whedon cut, I put that on a higher pedestal than the Snyder cut.
That gives that actually tracks for me. Like, so I'm in your camp where I definitely, I mean, I didn't like the Whedon version, and that's the only version I've watched. But from what I hear of people who are, I guess, Snyder fanboys, they say the Snyder cut is like a million times better.
Well, I
But
mean,
hearing
Zack Snyder could direct, a 10-second clip, and they'd say it's like
that's
the
true.
second
That's
coming
true.
of Christ. So
That's true. That's true.
I mean, there's fan and then there's cult. So
Right. For real.
But yeah,
So I guess
taking it back to this, I think like he Darkseid's fine in this, but I'm just and I think if I hadn't had the other version in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited, where he's played to perfection, like he's got this this icy cold, this almost like this calm. What's the best way to describe it? It's like this calm, sinister aspect.
Yeah.
And this one just doesn't quite have that same gravitas.
Yeah. No, I get it. That's what I was saying when you said like, like what I was what I was alluding to when I said that like it seemed a little bit too easy that they were able to feed him. Although it took took all of them to do it, it did seem a little bit too easy. Like that sinister, as you said, that sinister quality. It didn't quite get to the level that it should have been.
Right.
that cold-blooded. I had something popped as you were talking, something popped in my head, but it kind of I lost my train of thought now that I wanted to ask you about it.
Well, that's okay. Maybe it'll come up. So my final things on this is so you're talking about other people who are interested in this because my wife likes watching the superhero movies, but she has no familiarity with the comics.
So it's
so she was kind of tuning in and out when I was watching this. Like she was like watching a little bit, and then she was like kind of going away. So I don't think it really kind of grabbed her in the same way like the MCU stuff does.
Right.
So I think although she did, there are a few times when she kind of pops in, she's like, "Oh, is that Shazam?" Because she loves Shazam. She loved that.
Oh yes, I forgot to say that. That's go on.
But other than that, like for me, I think it because this movie had really divided. It had like a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. So there's
really
a lot of there's like a lot of negative opinions about this in the fan community.
Wow. Okay.
I think I'm somewhere between where you're at and where like the most of the fan community is. I'm like somewhere in the middle there. Like I don't think it's terrible. I think it's fine. I think it's it's a decent enough movie. But I think I'm also spoiled by a lot of other versions of Justice League.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And I think that's kind of where I fall, especially, even with some of the other animated movies. Like I think Justice League Doom and Crisis on Two Earths are probably my favorite of the animated Justice League movies.
Really?
That we've got. Yeah.
Okay. Honestly, I'm glad to hear you share this all this insight because I'm like, I never really stopped to even think about what the fan community thinks about this particular one, and
which is not actually a bad stance in some cases because I'm part of the fan community. God love them, but sometimes they take things a little bit too seriously.
Yeah. I mean, it's still fun though to hear like from a human perspective. For me, it's enlightening and it's fun to hear that. Oh wait. Your opinion is not the beginning and end all of you know what I mean? And it never occurred to me that like my opinion on this particular movie might be different than the consensus. So it's just real cool to hear that. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So I'm gonna go back now. I'm gonna check all the other ones and see what people have to say about it. But like it seems to me that basically from what you're saying that like this one, it's like like how people say that like Zack Snyder's Justice League, everyone thinks it's trash, but there's outliers out there that actually there's someone out there in the world that thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread. I kind of feel like that's me with this Justice League war now.
Here's a perfect example of this. I mean, we had covered Steel on this show, and it was. I thought it was utter dog shit, right?
Yeah.
But we had we had another podcast host on. We talked about Spider-Man 3, and he had covered Steel on his own podcast, and he actually kind of likes Steel, and that was a perfect example of like someone who can have like the complete opposite opinion of you.
Yeah.
No matter
of
how
the consensus.
no matter how bad it is or how bad you think it is, there's always going to be someone out there.
One person out there who that's great. That's funny, yo.
All right. But I think that about brings us to the end of Justice League War. Unless you had anything else, any other comments about it?
No, not really. I mean, I could pick your brain about different stuff related to it probably till tomorrow this time. But about the specific movie. No, there's nothing specific that I want to talk about. That people know about it. It's a good movie, like it. I guess what I would say, and from me, wrapping it up, at the end of the day, the biggest thing I think that I like about it at the end of the day is just it's fun. I think it's a very fun romp. It's a very fun DC animated Justice League movie. That's what it boils down to for me. Yeah.
I think, and that I'd agree with that. It's not my favorite, but there's nothing I really have against it. Like obviously I got some quibbles with different things.
Yes. Yeah.
But overall I enjoy it. Like it's not a movie that I hate or anything like that. I just had other ones that I like better.
Better. Yeah. Do you have a top 5 that you in terms of that you would be able to rattle off, like
Justice League specific? I think there's probably only 5 ones after that.
Really? Or DC animated movies.
Okay, DC I think I would probably put The Dark Knight Returns would probably be at the top of the list.
Okay.
After that, maybe New Frontier, Doom. Probably The Death and Return of Superman. I thought that was actually really well done. And then last one would probably be Crisis on Two Earths. Those would probably be like my top 5.
Top 5. Okay.
And that's just going off the top of my head. Once I actually had the list in front of me, I might quibble a little bit without it. And some of them I got to rewatch. But off the top of my head, that's probably the 5 I'd go with.
Quick related question. Are you in general DC or Marvel, or are you one of those that you don't have any particular?
So I love both. Historically I've been much more of a Marvel guy. Like I said, X-Men was my gateway drug, and then Spider-Man as well. So my original comics, when I first got into collecting comics, like my pull list was like 75% Marvel, 25% DC. So historically I've definitely been more of a Marvel guy. And I'm always going to have like a soft spot in my heart for Marvel because it's how I started out with, but there's tons of DC stuff that I love equally too.
Right.
And these days I'm pretty much reading them equally, like DC and Marvel stuff. And I think and even when we're talking, like, I think Marvel's movies are definitely better, but I think DC's TV stuff output has been generally better.
1000%. I think we're literally almost twins in that regard. Like 75% Marvel for me, 25% DC as far as overall fandom. Not specifically comics, but just in overall. But DC's TV stuff, specifically the animated stuff, is like crazy. Yeah. Okay.
Well, Henry, thanks so much for coming on. Why don't you tell people where they can find you?
So again, the simplest place to find me and find all my work is to go to the Capes and Mikes podcast. Capes and Mikes, think capes and tights, but instead of tights, mics, capes and mics. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then pretty much any other streaming platform, as well as you can do the same thing in YouTube. Just search Capes and Mikes and you'll get the Capes and Mikes YouTube channel. That's where you'll see a lot of the visuals and links to the different stuff that I'm doing.
And your new one's coming out in sometime in June, you said, right? Okay.
New one's coming out in June, and as you pointed out, probably by the time this episode is out, it will all be available. And the best way to find out where you can get it is, again, listen to the podcast and or the YouTube channel. We'll have direct links from the video that shows you the new book, Hearts and Powers. There'll be links directly to where you can get it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for agreeing to come on the show. It was a good conversation. And anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome.
Thanks. It was a real pleasure. I don't often get to talk with other people, because my podcast is a lot of times solo or
Mhm.
with my brother who is not so much of a superhero fan. So this was a real treat for me. So
Awesome.
thanks a lot.
Well, happy to do it anytime. You're more than welcome back. But that does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. Superherocinephiles.com is the website, and we are Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And if you join our Patreon, you get all these episodes a week in advance, and we got some other stuff that'll be dropping on the Patreon pretty soon if it hasn't already. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. If you enjoy the Superhero Cinephiles, then you'll also love my companion podcast, the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. All my Patreon subscribers get access to this exclusive podcast where I review superhero comics and graphic novels. Not sure what comics you want to read next or what you should dive into? I've got you covered on that. I'll be doing reviews, recommendations, and also talking to you about useful entry points if you're interested in reading some comics but don't know where you should start. Plus, you'll get access to all episodes of the main show a week before everyone else. On all of this for as little as just $1 a month. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/supercinemapod and you can sign up at any subscription amount to get started. Thanks so much for your support, and please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.